everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, back to school webinar, back to school sales. This is the point of the year where all parents start to cheer and look towards sending their kids back to school and getting them out of the house. We, in particular, have started doing our back to school sales surveys after the last couple of years. Some of it was due in part to the really dynamic consumer behavior shifts that keep occurring. In our latest survey of shoe executives and CEOs, that actually was the #1 issue they felt like they were facing right now, is understanding shifting consumer behavior. And that won by a wide margin. The previous quarter was supply chains. They were moving from supply chains and inventory issues to new inventory issues of over inventory, and how do we move that, and how do we convince consumers who have less disposable income and are facing higher prices across a basket of goods, how do we encourage them to purchase shoes in particular, and slice away more of their disposable income towards us? So that right now is a big challenge. And that really is what drove our survey for back to school this year. Was just like in the spring, we asked a lot about inflation. We asked about how higher prices were impacting households and how it was impacting their spending. For this survey in particular, we partnered with First Insight. So I welcome back Gretchen. If you don't know Gretchen, then you're not on our Tuesday calls. Every Tuesday at 2 p.m. our member intel calls, where you can join and hear in real time all the new data that we have that we're collecting and analyzing, as well as our partners like First Insight. So before we kick off the results, and I will say this is an exclusive look to those who joined us today. We will officially send the full survey out next week. We will drop in a link so you can get it today for joining us as a thank you to get ahead of the game. We'll send it out next week very broadly to the industry to take a look and start to adjust. But Gretchen, really quickly, I'll turn it to you really quickly to explain, if they don't know who First Insight is, what you do and how we work together on this, and then we'll jump into the results.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Andy, and it's great to be with everybody today. So First Insight is very pleased to be a partner of FDRA and support the great work that you all do for and with the industry. And we are a software as a service experience management platform that leverages predictive analytics to help companies to really create and price and market, launch, commercialize winning new offerings, mostly products. We do a lot in footwear. There are customers of ours on this call right now. And we do a lot, although beyond that, in other categories of apparel, accessories, home goods, consumer products, etc. Globally. And we're serving about $750 billion worth of combined annual revenue now, a couple hundred customers. And I've been around since 2007. And I'm just, very excited to be in a position to help in some pretty turbulent waters that we're all facing together.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And First Insight will be sponsoring our cocktail party in New York City, August 1st, Bryant Park Grill. We're really excited. So if you're going to be in town for Fanny Market Week, go to FDRA.org. You'll find out information there about that upcoming cocktail party that we have. But it's really about bringing community together, the footwear industry together. And we appreciate First Insight for their sponsorship of that and many other programs that we have to help support the footwear industry. So with that said, let me go ahead and pull up my screen and we can jump into this today. We will try to accomplish this in about 20 to 30 minutes. If you have questions as we go through this survey, please drop them down in the chat box below. Let me pull this up. There we go. Drop it down in the chat box below, and that way we can get to those in real time as we go through it. Whoops, really quickly. So I'll go slower. If I can, goodness. All right, hold on. I'm trying to do present mode and it is not working well. Let's see. Is that better? Okay, that's going to go slower. There we go. Can you see that, Gretchen?
Yeah, it could be a little bigger, but I think it's okay.
Okay, let me increase the size. It's always technology. There we go. So we'll start there. All right, right off the bat, these are easy kind of qualifications that we use to make sure that we're getting the correct information. The question we use in particular is what level of school is your oldest child? So first question was, do you have school-age children? And so we based the survey on people who only answered yes, and we kicked out the other responses to get to actual families with school-age children. So we asked what level of school is your oldest child. So throughout the survey, if you keep this in mind as you're trying to look at your marketing, your sales strategies, most of these are going to be elementary school, middle school, high school age groups. And then we asked how many kids do you have in your household? How many students are you shopping for this year? So obviously the majority here is at 44% is one kid in the house, one student. 34% is two students, 15% is three. And then my goodness, those with four and more, God bless you, have 7%. Good luck with that. Those are the 7% there are the people cheering the most for back to school to happen again and get them out of their house. All right, as we get into this, here we go. One question that was brand new that we asked this year that First Insight raised that we should be thinking about and asking about is social media usage. So obviously here, 61% said that they are planning to use social media in some way to do research, to assist them back to school shopping. That could be based on product to see what's there. It could be looking at discounts that they might find, anything around that. And then we actually broke it down by income for better targeting. And what we found on that is typically those with lower incomes are not using social media so much. Those with higher incomes are using social media much more. And then we dive down into the report. And again, we'll send you this link and you can have all this. You don't need to take notes. Then we dove into what those breakouts were. And obviously Facebook continues to be the largest place that people are looking on social media, followed by Instagram. Surprisingly to me, it was YouTube at 38%. I was kind of surprised by that. But Gretchen, I know you guys also look at where people look for research and shopping. Does this kind of match up with what you guys normally see?
Yeah, it does, Andy. It's interesting because certainly the younger generations poo-poo Facebook pretty soundly, but just volume-wise, yeah, it is still a pretty strong player in that mix. But certainly even a year ago, or a couple of years ago, we wouldn't have seen the strength that we do now in TikTok and YouTube as shopping research is also up and coming.
Great. Okay, I'll keep going through this so we can get more into some of the data point. Again, if you have a question as we go through this, drop it in the chat box. I'm doing the best I can to look across all these different things and manage it, but I'm pretty sure I can dig down and see who might be commenting. Where do you expect to purchase shoes for your child? We asked this in particular, online, in store, both. And I think traditionally when we think of kids, and I have two young kids, one's going to kindergarten this year, and we still have one in preschool, but obviously with growing children, the in-store experience is you walk in, you put on the shoe and your mom presses their finger as hard as they can against the front to see if it'll fit and give it a little bit more so you get the more values as they grow into it. So obviously in-store remains paramount for that reason. But online, I think, and because of COVID and all the digital shifts that we've seen, has taken a larger bite of that in ways that we didn't anticipate. And then the breakout here, when you get the report, you can look into it. But we did it by region, we did it by income, and we also looked at our 2021 survey. In 2021, 69% of families were purchasing shoe in store, while 19% were purchasing online. We expanded it this year to include both so we could kind of get a better idea of where it was. But you can see that, I mean, even with 38% saying both, I think you can infer that online continues to grow for families as a shopping channel to make those purchases.
Yeah, and one of the things to bear in mind is that that sort of purchase actually happens, right? Online or in store, and then some people are purchasing in some channel online and in another channel in store. So I live really close to a Target store, for example, and I'm much more likely to just go ahead and buy in store there versus some other things I'd buy more online. But the other thing that we were seeing in a lot of our research is that the whole, buy online, pick up in store, the interplay, this sort of omni-channel or unified commerce concept is here to stay.
Yeah.
That really took hold during COVID and is not going away anywhere.
Yeah. You know that when Target is giving some of their parking spots to the digital channel, right? Pull in here, we'll deliver it out. Same with Total Wine, where we get our wine, I'll admit. What most influences you when you shop in store? So we asked these people who were shopping in store, what drives them there? And obviously selection, ease of shopping, child preference, etc. But it really is coming down to cost. I think a lot of this has to do with the inflation issues. But the assumption is for 33% and probably more is if they're going to the store, they can actually peruse. In some ways, maybe easier to look for discounts as they walk the store faster, maybe than they can online. And people assume maybe in that 33%, they can get better deals locally than maybe online shipped to their house. So again, as you look at the data, we try to break it out by family income. One thing was really interesting too. It's the third bullet point. It says 20% of families making more than $50,000. I put this in there. They didn't say this, but they're peer pressured by their kids into shoe selection. So I think that's really interesting because I think it is true. We often don't think about that in consumer behavior, but the kids who may also be using social media, peer pressuring there. And I certainly did that. I tried to get my parents to buy me Birkenstocks for many years. Price point was too high, so we purchased an off-brand, don't tell Birkenstocks, until I was much older, but I think that continually happens. But they're being driven into store experiences based on sale price, rewards, coupons there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gretchen.
Just, maybe this is a good place to add in something we were discussing, Andy, that, we've been seeing these changes in consumer behavior, like you said, that's the thing keeping footwear executives up at night now. And, some of our research is one of the things that First Insight does on an ongoing basis is a series of research studies. We did that all through COVID, a dozen of them. And now we're taking a pretty hard, close look at inflation and how it's impacting consumers, and kind of aligned with what we're seeing here. 42% of consumers said that due to the inflationary pressures and economic instability, they're shopping more for deals, looking for the sales, looking for clearance items. And then, another 40% said that they're staying within a budget. So, just interesting to see how some of the inflationary pressures are playing out in terms of shopping behaviors.
Yep, good point. And if you look in the chat box, I dropped down Gretchen's email and First Insights URL there, so you guys can reach out specifically for those inflation reports that they have to get that data that she's referring to. Further into the report, we asked what type of in-store location that they're actually going to. Predominantly, it's shoe chains, it's Shoe Show, Famous Footwear, Shoe Carnival, etc. Local chains in their neighborhoods or in the strip malls that they're used to shopping in. 28% said they're going to go to Target, Walmart, or Costco, those big box retailers. 14% said department stores, could be Nordstrom, could be Kohl's, or Macy's. 18% said they're looking specifically on brands. So that maybe they're going to Nike.com, Vans.com, UGG.com, somewhere like that, but purchasing direct from the brand. And we see that increase perhaps not just because of consumer shifts, but because of product selection shifts, especially as Nike starts to pull back product from brick and mortar retailers, and doing more direct to consumer where you might only find certain types of shoes. So I think that is going to be a growing channel that we have to look at going forward, as we balance all these things. But obviously, I guess for this one in particular, I should qualify that the 18% is more like not online, but it's more shoe store specific. So maybe it's the Nike store in New York. But increasingly, what I see is a lot of brands setting up stores in the shopping areas that are the outlets. And you can find Vans in the outlets. You can find Nike. You can find Adidas. Just up the street, we have a big one. And I think more and more brands are setting up there or have traditionally been in those spaces to take advantage of shoppers coming through. Getting in further into it, we ask okay, if you're shopping online for back to school, we asked how long they expect shipping to take. And this is always interesting because this is cost in your supply chain, depending on how you want to get it to the consumer. And I continue to say on all these calls, we have this large assumption that 2-day shipping is the norm for consumers, which here we see is actually not the case. It's 3 to 5 days shipping is what they expected in. Part of this could be a hangover from the holidays where there were so many shipping delays, it kind of shifted us a little bit. But if you could move away from next day shipping or 2-day shipping, unless that's part of your branding strategy, you could save money because the consumer is okay with it taking a little bit of time from that standpoint. I will say 13% same day shipping was interesting to me. We see some retailers now actually willing to do what I call the pizza model, where they'll actually have someone in the store, they'll have DoorDash or another service, Uber or someone actually take that out to a customer to their home and drop it off same day. Obviously, it's around a geographic location that makes economic sense to the brand. But more and more, I guess people are getting used to that. And my assumption is when we ran this was, do people even know that there's an option that they could do that? I think we're very used to it for food delivery, maybe not so much product, but that's a channel, Gretchen, that I think we really got to take a look at and see, is that going to be a new shift that we start seeing?
Yeah. And the other thing that I think is an interesting learning from some of the other survey work that we were doing about, how and where are people cutting back when we were talking, okay, specifically more about groceries. But 41% of consumers overall said that they were ratcheting down on name brand purchases. So, it would be interesting to see whether that is something that will carry through into footwear or not. Because, how important is that peer pressure, brand vis-a-vis,
Right.
hey, I need to get you 4 pairs of shoes and I can't afford for them all to be brand X.
Right.
So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays
That's a
out.
great point too. Yep. In the report, we also asked how much they're willing to spend on shipping, so you can take a look at that there. Most people, the only honest people in the survey, the 13% that says I'm not willing to spend anything on shipping, that would include my wife. So obviously there's data points there that you can take a look at and plan your shipping strategy around. We then ask consumers, when do you think the best deals will be? When is it going to actually drive you to go shop? Obviously, we know most shopping will occur before school starts. And this is particularly interesting around when school opens, and everywhere around the country, school opens at different times, typically before Labor Day, sometimes after Labor Day. But if we look at it now and we compare it 2022 to 2021, most people remain looking right now through mid-August for the best deals. I've already started to hear, I heard an ad from Famous Footwear on the radio the other day. And so it's out for back to school. And I'm sure if we started driving around now, you already started seeing promotions and windows at brick and mortar. So it makes sense to that extent that right now is going to be the hottest time to start the sales season. And then it will slowly kind of, go down after that. We asked typically, and we phrase this in a very specific way up to families, but we know that kids have a lot of activities. Maybe they play sports, maybe they're in band, maybe they just need 2 or 3 pairs just for school to get them through until the holidays, depending on family strategy. But we were asking, how many pairs per child total in the household do you expect to get back to school? And it looks like 2 remains in 2022. The highest number, just like last year. And it looks like 3 pairs per child, it actually grew. So that's a positive if we look at that. But my guess is too on this, Gretchen, we have to remember some sports were not active last year because of
Right,
COVID.
right.
And we see more and more in schools, the mask mandates and more restrictive areas are
Mhm.
reduced. Programs are starting to come back, after school programs in particular, and sports that weren't outdoors, that were
Right.
indoors, are now coming back. And that could make sense for an uptick for that.
Mhm. Or it's just their kids like me who my parents said I walked on the tops of my shoes and but I mean, you're looking at 7% is not a big number for four or more, but on the
Yeah,
flip side, that's more than double what it was last year,
that's right. That's a good
and
point.
the 18% versus 11% is a large percentage increase, right? On the 3 pairs per child. So positive for the
There are
footwear
some positives.
industry.
That's right. We went into price range per shoes. How much per pair are you willing to spend? We compared it 2022 to 2021. Not much of a change there in terms of 41 and 42% saying under $60 per pair. So that's there. But we do see an increase of over $100 per pair. We went from 3% to 18%. That's a
That's huge.
huge jump. A really huge jump. And obviously in the report, we break out, by income, and we try to break it out by different family dynamics. But yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that stood out was, okay, most people $6 per pair makes sense. Okay. Some of, same 60 to 75,
Mhm.
75 to 100 is the same. Then all of a sudden it just boomed, to where people are willing to spend a little bit more money on, at least one pair of really nice shoes for their kid. So Gretchen, I don't know how you read this, but that's a positive
Yeah,
development.
I mean, honestly, I read it that I don't know if they're happy about. It says, what do you expect to
Right.
pay? And inflation is a real thing. And so certainly 96% of consumers are saying that they've, exactly, they've been seeing inflation out there, including in footwear. And there are some aspects of the footwear market where they're talking about cutting back a little more heavily,
Mhm.
but those were questions more geared to kind of you as an adult answering this survey. And so
Right.
those people were talking about, dress shoes was one of the biggest cutback areas, right? Among kind of apparel, footwear accessories, because of the higher prices. In the case of school shoes or back to school for kids, you don't really have much choice, right?
Mhm.
So I think if they're recognizing that the prices are higher and they'll just need to pay them.
Yep. The total amount they expect to spend on all their kids, all the shoes this year. So there's a bit of a, again, there's a bit of a shift here. Last year was 100 to 150. That reduced greatly, and I think this is inflation that we're looking at
Mhm.
here, obviously. So we shifted from more than $300 again. And these are important when you look at these surveys. I'll just tell people, when you look at this, you want this to match some of this, right? And that way the psychology matches up from
Mhm.
what they're willing to pay per pair and then what it might look like overall. So
Mhm.
I was happy to see that the report methodology was great, because it does line up to where if they're paying $100, they're also looking at $300 bill overall for those shoes. So that's important to know.
Mhm.
But
And Andy, that's one thing I previewed a little bit with this, with the little spoiler yesterday, that when you look at the tan and brown, right? So 200, over 200, those
mhm,
two buckets together, 9% and 8% in 2021. But then it was more than double that in 2022. And, that's, again, I don't think people are excited about it, but I think the reality is they're seeing that the prices are higher and they're going to have to be spending more. Plus, as we saw, they're planning on buying more pairs
right.
because Joey's playing basketball.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a combined effect there.
And it pretends that if you look at those numbers as sales, quantity and sales could be quite good. My concern is, are they purchasing a lot right now because they think they can get really good deals and they're willing to spend more? And then come October, November, they might just pause and wait until holiday kicks up again and they start looking. We don't know that, but that's something to keep in mind as we look towards the fall and hopefully we have a nice fall season, but it's just hard to know.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Again, are you planning on spending more or less? We ask this again to make sure that we're asking and qualifying all our information and data. But yeah, 44% have said they're spending the same as last year. 36% said they're spending more. 20% said they're spending less. And again, I think Gretchen, we look at this as
Yeah.
inflation. They have to
Well,
save money.
yeah, and one thing that struck me was, you know, back in 2021, their reference year was back to school 2020, which was a complete disaster.
Mhm.
So, you know, back to school 2020 was not really going back to school. It was, you know, starting school from home. So I'm not overly alarmed. I don't think it's inconsistent that in 2021, you know, they said they were spending more than
Mhm.
2020 because
Yep.
2020 was a crazy year. And so I think that it's all still consistent that we're, you know, seeing only 36% versus 41 prior year, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. That's a great point.
And you know, one of the things you and I talked about, Andy, about this whole pricing thing, right, is that you know, many companies are now trying to figure out, okay, I've got this inventory, and you know, maybe I need to investigate what people are actually willing to pay for it now, and have kind of some fact-based data about that, right? You know, versus really being more promotional than needed, let's say.
Right.
Now we're seeing consumers recognize they're going to have to pay more, so it would behoove us to not get too crazy on the promotions.
Yeah, well, we've been talking internally and with other people, and it's like the more a brand or retailer knows their audience and targets that audience to grow that pie, the better, because and using all the data and analytics to support their assumptions on the trend and all that, but also the ability to use First Insight to check those trends,
Mm,
second set of eyes to check that to make sure it actually matches up with what their consumers expecting, so that they don't miss trend, and they're not sitting on product because no one wants it, or the price is too high or strategy's off. So
but they're also not leaving money on the table,
exactly.
right?
And then here we get into the inflation part that we've been talking a lot about, and I know for a fact, you know, there's all these, the economics is different than the politics, is different than our pocketbooks. So I think that's important to point out. Um, but here, even with, I think, gas prices starting to decline a bit due to demand decreasing, people looking at the high prices and making choices not to drive as much or driving it down. Hopefully, some supplies coming in a little bit more to balance it out. But regardless, food prices as an overall basket of goods remains exorbitantly high. And this is one thing that, you know, a few outlets have been talking about, but it's the main driver now, inflation instead of energy, that I think we'll see when it's reported out for July next month. Food prices remain extremely high. And obviously you can't make a choice like if you didn't want to drive, okay, but we got to eat, right? Especially someone
Mhm.
like me, I'm very hungry all the time. So I think that it remains an issue that inflation is still high in different segments, even if we see it tapering a bit. But here it's, you know, it focuses on how much more they're spending per month.
Mhm.
And you know, the up to 20%, 33, you got 9% saying they're paying over $500 more than they were because of inflation.
Mhm.
So all that just pretends that I guess the way to say it, there's a frustrated consumer when they're going in, right? They want to make the purchase. They're just grinding their teeth a little bit at the price that they're having to see. My wife went to Costco this week while we were in New York, and she was like, the eggs were like, you know, obviously Costco eggs are big, but something like $10 now for the eggs. She's like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And she's comparing it to where she shopped, like, you know, 3 months ago when we went out there and took a look. So I think that's where the consumer is looking at. It's like comparing what it was 3 or 4 months ago to what it is now, and how it's biting them a little bit.
Yeah.
So
We had 87% of consumers say that they were cutting back on grocery purchases because of the costs. So it's a pretty high number.
yeah, and I mean, you're making
Mhm.
switches, right? You're switching
Right.
out a certain thing you may really like that, and you're looking for what I call manager meat. It's like same day
Mhm.
expiration. I'm going to buy that. I'm going to cook it that night. But here we also asked, we just said, okay, out of this, because we know gas prices are extremely high, First Insight added this question in, which I think is great. Are you looking to do more online shopping? So you're reducing going out and shopping, and 67% said yes. So whether they consciously do it or not, when you ask the question and they think about it, they're like, gosh, yeah, I'd rather have somebody deliver it to my house than drive over to the strip mall or to a big box retailer right now, just to save the effort. So are higher prices changing where you're shopping? And this is interesting too. I had a conversation with a discounted retailer uh earlier this week where they said foot traffic was not as large as it had been in previous months. And we sat there and hemmed and hawed about that a little bit. And we came to the realization perhaps what is driving them back to the traditional retail channel where you see new product, new brands versus the discount channels where it's off season from past seasons is the discounts. And they're actually seeing the discounts again. And they're saying, oh, well, I can get a deal. I can go back to there and I can get a deal again. And it's not that they're not going to go shop at discount retailers, but in the spring when we looked at this, 75% said they were shifting to discount retailers. And I think that was in direct proportion to the price increases that were fixed, right? There was no discounting, there was nowhere to hide. So they go there. And now we look at this and ask a question, and it's interesting that it's lower, but you still have, almost half still going to discounters right now because of high prices. But I think that'll be the issue over the next little bit. And Gretchen,
Mm.
again, we could talk about this ad nauseum, but the
Mhm.
discounting and the pricing
Yeah.
and the switches have a large impact on consumer behavior. So maybe you can just talk about that really quickly too.
Yeah, I mean, they have, well, pricing, of course, is one of the fastest levers to pull, right? And even after you've got the goods all the way through your supply chain and, in your warehouses or even your stores, you can still modify that pricing lever. And, so that's honestly something that we're seeing a lot of our customers do right now is just, reevaluate that inventory and what their right price points should be so that they're, to your point, not going to end up with this continued inventory glut, and
Right.
overstocks, but also, not leave profitability on the table that they could be gaining where consumers are willing to pay.
Yeah.
Just getting that understanding is pretty important.
One thing you said this week when we were at our sources summit that I was fascinated with is like some people will use your service to take a look at new samples are about to launch out, right? So they're
Mhm.
trying to get, either this at the start of the sampling process and they just want to know should they make the shoe, or it's at the end of the process and they know they want to make it, but now it's like, what price do we stick it as? You said people are going back with inventory and saying, we have a whole lot of these shoes. We don't want to leave money on the table, but we do want to move them out of our warehouse. So now they're going back to where they're, they're doing new research on old shoes in the warehouse. Can you just speak about that really quickly? Because I was fascinated that I wouldn't even think of that as an
Mhm.
option, but now they're like, we got to get rid of them. But again, can't leave money on the table.
Right. I mean, it's basically that in a nutshell. You expressed it pretty darn well, but it is something that we're seeing a lot more of is, yes, testing was done earlier. I mean, let's face it, the development cycle for shoes is not the shortest thing out there, right? So sometimes the testing that was done was a number of months before those styles actually hit the stores. And now that there's stock in the warehouse and or in the stores and you're trying to move it, it's important, especially since all of this water has passed under the bridge around the inflation that's been coming in. So what is the consumer sentiment now? And honestly, it ties back to what your retail executives told you on the survey. That's their biggest concern right now, what's keeping them up at night. So it's all the more important to understand where the target customers' heads are now. And one good thing, I mean, we're presenting these macro data, right? I mean, we're
Mhm.
surveying thousands of consumers. One of the things that folks like to do with the First Insight tool is actually survey their own customers, their target customers, or their actual CRM database of purchasers of their products. So they know at a very granular level what's going to play in Peoria with their own customer base.
Great. Last point we have for this survey, and again, I'm about to take the link, drop it into the chat box so you can download it before we get off. Again, this will fully come out next week. Publicly, you guys get first look, first access. Again, if you have a question, drop it into the chat box and we can cover it. But drop it in quick because we're about to wrap it up. We promise we do a really succinct, quick webinar with everyone. Last one was a question we've been asking a lot more in our surveys, but it's a future look. So we're asking the consumer themselves, how do you feel? And this in particular is your family. So it is the children market that they're thinking about as they go through and answer these questions. But if you look at this, it's really fascinating that 21%, and it's not a huge uptick. All my purchases are going to be online for my kids going forward. That's unfathomable in 2019 before COVID. Would never have thought that. Yeah, it's slightly upticks here and here and here, but that's very unfathomable. And then you can go down and look. Majority will be online, but I'll still buy in store from time to time. Majority of my shoe purchases will be in store. So it flips the other way. So the left side is the online kind of look, majority look. The right side is the brick and mortar look. So you can see that it there are some shifts that are occurring there that and some of this could be order online, pick up in store, etc. But we're trying to get at the mentality of how people consider shopping online and the ease of it, because if it wasn't working, the numbers would not be going up on the online. And my guess is that there's more tools being implemented online to reduce the friction of search, filter, purchase. And in some ways, online purchasing may be easier than in store because you can get better terms in terms of quarterly payments or something like that. So this is something really fascinating. And we had retailers ask us to include this. They saw it in past reports and they were really continually interested in where the consumer looks forward, not just in this holiday season, but our back to school season, but looks forward to what they're thinking about and how the ease of shopping. I guess it is, Gretchen.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's the look at the report. Gretchen, if you have any, final takeaways or thoughts that you want to share before we wrap up, and as you do that, I'll drop in the link into the chat box for everybody.
No, that's great. I mean, I think the good news to me is that there are some of those bright spots around, number of pairs per student, per kid that people plan on buying, the amount of spend that people are planning for. They might not love that fact, but they're planning to spend more. So, there are some things that can bode well for footwear, coming into this back to school, even though we all know there are a variety of headwinds from the over inventory to the economic uncertainty. At least it's offset by some pretty bright points there.
Yeah. And as I look at this too, I look at the overall economic environment and consumer disposable income and the constraints that people are facing more and more against that pocketbook. I think retailers really have to be more agile than they ever have before with marketing, with discounting, to move the inventory at the right time. So obviously, when we looked at the survey and it was like most people are looking right now, that's an opportunity to throw out a little bit of a discount to lure someone in, but you don't want to give away the store, right? And I think that's the key thing is the consumer knows they're going to pay higher prices than they want to pay, and they're getting used to that. They do want a discount and they do want a deal. This almost reminds me of shopping for a car, right? There's like that. What drives you in to take a look at something and then it's all about the feel, right? You drive the car home and you're a lot happier if you feel like you weren't fleeced. If you get fleeced and you still like the car, there's something that ags at you for like a month that happened. But I think it's the same thing in the consumer environment because they're more conscious about how they're spending their money and where they're spending their money. And so I think, as a retailer, you almost have to go in every day or so and look at your numbers and then start making adjustments as needed based on region, based on product, whatever it is. But but obviously those relationships with the brand that you're selling is very important to be able to do that and have flexibility in your terms. But I think what we're going to see, Gretchen, is we're going to see some, we'll see some good sales at the start as we get to Labor Day. Then after Labor Day, I think that crack cocaine is going to take hold because they're going to be trying to move old inventory against the new inventory. And I think, my concern is that mentality of what consumers will start to see and being flooded with trying to bring them back in to buy that one extra pair is going to take hold, and it may slip into the fall. And I don't know whether you think this or not, but it could influence where we start with holiday season in terms of discounting.
Yeah, I mean, I see you've adopted the crack cocaine terminology as well. And, just that over the course of the pandemic, when, there was poor availability of product, right? Consumers got used to the idea that they might not be able to wait for that sale. They, might have to just go ahead and buy the darn thing when they saw it in store. Otherwise, Joey might not get that special train that he wanted for Christmas. And so it kind of unlearned some of the bad learning that we've all reinforced for so many years.
Right.
Wait for the deal, wait for the deal. And it's just unfortunate that some of these factors are aligning to sort of make it a little bit too easy for everyone in the industry to fall back into the crack cocaine of promotion. Because it'd be nice to be able to hold on to at least some of that. Hey, you better buy it now because you don't know. So it just is important, as we've been saying, to just really understand what the actual willingness to pay is and where to cut and where not. And it's a delicate dance for sure. I'm not here saying it's easy by any means.
Yep.
But at least having some good data, can help make good decisions. Great.
Well, I didn't see any questions in the chat box, which meant we did a great job and covered everything and solved all the world's problems. We appreciate everybody joining this webinar today. Again, the official report will go out next week. I did drop in the report in the chat box for those who joined us today, so you can take that now. So I'll hold on just a second as we close out, but grab that link, pull it up and save it. I will not send it out afterwards until next week. So first look, grab it now out of the chat box. So you've got it. And again, Gretchen, thanks for joining me today to go through some of this and flesh it out a little bit for the folks who join us for the exclusive first look. And again, in the chat box as well, Gretchen's email is there that you can ask her about the other consumer reports on inflation and spending, et cetera. You can reach out to them. And also as a reminder, because everyone on this call is a member, to join the 2 p.m. calls every Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, where we go through data like this. Gary Rains, our chief economist, grabs data all the time. And we cover anything we can on price, inventory, imports, sales, et cetera. And look at the marketplace as a whole. And of course, Gretchen's been a regular coming on, helping share their reports as well. So don't miss that every single week. So with that, we wish you a great back to school season. Hopefully you're selling those 4 pairs at $300 or more. Hope for the best, but we appreciate you joining us today. Gretchen, again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck, everyone. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.